On today's show, we break down the thrilling middleweight title bout at UFC 248 between current champ Israel Adesanya and the challenger Yoel Romero. This is the last Stylebender's first defence after his sensational knockout of Robert Whittaker last October. The flamboyant Kiwi's next goal is to build his legacy as one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time. In Yoel Romero, however, the champ faces one of the most fearsome fighters to ever grace the Octagon. With a highlight reel full of devastating knockouts, the Soldier of God will stop at nothing to finally get his hands on UFC gold. Hello and welcome to UFC Inside the Octagon. John Gooden alongside Dan Hardy, and today we're going to be looking at some middleweight madness as the current champion Israel Adesanya looks to defend his title for the very first time against the human specimen that is Yoel Romero. Dan, straight away, I mean, Israel Adesanya's rise has been just phenomenal. 2 years, under 2 years, in fact, to become the champion. But here's the thing. Why Yoel Romero? It's almost like he's chosen him, if you listen to a lot of his interviews, and that is a scary prospect.
It is, and I have a lot of respect for him for taking that fight. First of all, John, a very happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like Yoel Romero's let you in on his secret because you look a day over 60. I mean, it's very impressive.
I'll share my skincare routines with you after.
So, yes, I mean, lots of respect for Adesanya for taking this fight. I mean, really, he didn't need to, because Romero's not in a position where we would consider him as the #1 contender right now. But it's Yoel Romero. He's got that presence and that aura around him that anybody that fights him is in for a hard night. And no one's made it look easy. Win or lose, no one's ever made it look easy. So Adesanya's taking this fight because he wants to prove to everybody that he can beat Yoel Romero easier than everybody else. I just respect him for taking that challenge on, because getting to the 25-minute distance with Yoel Romero or stopping him in between is unbelievably impressive, and that for me is a huge credential on his record.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I'm giving him my mortgage money to take to the casino, Israel Adesanya, because he's going in with some risky ones there. But obviously those guys, they feel like they have the strategy to beat this man. It is a very exciting fight indeed. A couple of things. We all know that Yoel Romero is of more senior years, but it doesn't seem to matter. It really doesn't, so I'm not really reading too much into that. We have the taller man and Adesanya. They are built very differently, Dan. That's going to give him a reach advantage, which, as the striker, will obviously play into his hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, height and reach is going to really play into his advantage, basically because of the way he fights. You know, keeping people right on the end of his limbs, he's very, very good at that, and managing that distance, which we'll get into. The one thing I will say about Yoel Romero, though, I mean, 6 foot, 73.5-inch reach, it's not huge for a middleweight. But because he's so fast and explosive, I mean, you know, what is a 6.5 reach advantage when you can do 0 to 60 and, you know, whatever it is speed he moves at? So he can negate a lot of those reach advantages by just putting his foot on the gas.
Yeah.
That's where Adesanya's challenged, in my opinion, and how he deals with that onslaught.
We have a perfect 18-0 fighter coming in, but he has a really big background in professional kickboxing and pro boxing. On the other side, we have, of course, former world champion and Olympic medalist. But this guy uses a lot of his background, and we talk about it as analysts or fans will always recognise the wrestling of Yoel Romero, but I think I calculated he's taken down, or he's used the takedown 10 times in all of his 5-round fights, which isn't a lot for an Olympic wrestler.
No, it's not. It's not, and I'm not sure whether that's more impressive or not, because obviously Adesanya, we know what he's good at, and he builds his game around that striking ability. Yoel Romero, we know he's got this ace card in his pocket, which he doesn't seem to use very often. When we do see him use it, it's like a blast double at the end of the round, like in the Paulo Costa fights.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's a safety net for him. The fact that he's got this athleticism and this power has just translated into a very, very successful striking career. It's not as clean and crisp as Adesanya. It's very, very different in the way that he approaches it. Adesanya will dismantle you. He'll knock your head into the front row.
He'll blast you.
It's a very, very different thing. But that speed that he's got, as well as the, I mean, he's got a limited striking skill set. It's to be fair, it's a limited skill set, but that limited skill set involves jumping knees and, you know, I mean, wildly powerful punches and flurries up against the fence. I mean, even though he doesn't have the credentials and maybe the striking ability that Adesanya's got, it doesn't mean he's not nearly as impactful. I mean, they're tied for third most knockdowns in middleweight history. And you would think that his stats would be favouring more towards wrestling, but like you said, he doesn't really use it, mainly because he's not really needed to so far.
And I think that Romero's getting better. He's evolving. I'm sure we're going to touch on that as we get into things. And let's stay with Romero, because I think he's got a great big body of work that City Kickboxing...
Great big body.
Great big body, full stop. Next paragraph. So the City Kickboxing guys have a lot to work with. And although I just said that there's been some changes largely, I'm not actually sure that Romero really knows what he's going to do every time he goes in there. I don't feel like he's a blueprint guy. He just goes on a lot of feeling.
And this is where the challenge for the City Kickboxing guys are. Adesanya is very good at watching what's in front of him and reading those movement patterns, seeing the predictabilities and then starting to exploit it. What we know about Yoel Romero is predicting that unpredictability is almost impossible. I mean, look at this. Like a fake front kick to a back fist.
Yes, love it.
Like lead hook kick. These aren't the kind of techniques that you take an Olympic silver medalist wrestler onto the mat and you go, I tell you what, we'll teach you a flying knee, we'll teach you a lead hook kick. You know, they're not techniques that you teach somebody. You teach them a double jab cross, which is what we've started seeing him use more in his later career. In the beginning, it was all about rocket fuel. It was all about blasting people out of the way. And you don't want this Yoel Romero chasing you around the octagon, throwing bombs at you, because everything he hits you with is full power. And to try and close this down, to try and control it, to try and put a fire blanket on this. I mean, Rockhold's trying his best to hold this tie clinch, but, you know, getting his ribs bruised in the process. Everything he does is damaging because everything's 100% power and full speed. I feel like these bursts are the biggest danger for Adesanya. And what Adesanya needs to do is not stay in range and just allow this to happen. If at any point he sees that tidal wave building, that momentum rising through Yoel Romero, get clear.
Yeah.
Get out of the way. Let him get it out of his system. Because if he... I mean, look at that. That was 2 rounds of kickboxing against Machida. Like, he played kickboxing for 2 rounds of Machida, came out in the 3rd round and was like, I've had enough of this now. Bang, finish. Within a few seconds of deciding he wanted the takedown, he's got it, and Machida's unconscious. He'll play the kickboxing game a little bit. Like I said, his wrestling is in his back pocket. I feel before the wrestling comes, though, that explosion is really what we're expecting from him, and that's what Romero's game's all about.
It's like watching the liftoff of a spacecraft. But even though you know it's coming, you see everything, the smoke, the flames, and all of a sudden it goes. It's like, well, I know it's coming, but not everyone's able to get out of the way of it.
Exactly.
Robert Whittaker spent a lot of time with Yoel Romero in the Octagon, and I feel like when he approached the Adesanya fight, he'd almost adopted a Yoel Romero type approach, which, in my eyes, it's therefore been like a pretty good dress rehearsal for Adesanya coming into this fight with Yoel Romero.
Yes, it was. And I'll be honest, I was quite surprised at how Whittaker approached that fight.
I think he was in the end as well.
I mean, it was a little bit like he expected to not be able to reach Adesanya. He expected to be throwing and missing the first few shots. So he started every one of his striking combinations with a little bit of a sprint, like we see from Yoel Romero. The difference when Adesanya fought Gastelum is that he wanted to stay in the pocket a little more. I felt like he approached this fight with a little bit more ego, like he had a point to prove. So he stayed in range a little more with Gastelum and was using his head movement a bit more, which is why he got clipped in the early rounds. And I think he'll look back on that fight and he took that forward into the Whittaker fight because, I mean, look at that bounce off the fence. He was not nearly as interested in this fight in holding the ground in front of him. If Whittaker started to gather momentum, he would just give him that space. And he treated this fight much more like a marathon than I've got to beat him in this round, I've got to beat him in this round. If he allows that first round to slip out of his fingers and just kind of read his movement patterns, punish him a little bit, bang, a couple of body kicks here and there, he'll do that. And I think we saw a lot of evolution between the Gastelum fight and the Whittaker fight, and the evolution is going to serve him so well against Romero. Because if you think, if Romero starts out and he throws 10 punches and he misses, his next combination might be 8 punches. Then it might be 6.
Right.
The more he misses, the less he's going to throw. So when it comes down to him throwing 1s and 2s, like he did in the Costa fight, this is where Adesanya can stay in range and just pick and poke and prod and find those openings that are going to damage him over the distance. Like I said, I don't think he's going to approach this like I need to get this finish in the first round. He knows the danger of Yoel Romero, which is why he knows it's a credential for his record when he fights him. A win over Yoel Romero, whether it's a knockout at any point in the 25 minutes or it goes the distance, the most important thing is that he's impressive and he's largely untouched.
Right.
I mean, even in the knockout against Whittaker here, he'd measured him with that right hook, but knew he needed the left hook to finish. But when we got the left hook finish, he took a shot.
And he was disappointed.
He was disappointed, yeah. I mean, that shows you where his head's at, because he wants to be so clinical and clean that there's no question at all.
Interesting it's at 5 rounds and not at 3. I think that Yoel Romero is a more terrifying prospect at 3 rounds, if I'm honest, but Adesanya gets him at 5. Opportunity to look great. And talking of greatness, we're going to see some more from both of these fighters as Dan dives into some more analysis on the other side of these. Welcome back to UFC's Inside the Octagon. John Gunn alongside Dan Hardy, and we're talking about the middleweight title fight between Adesanya and Romero. Dan, we've already covered some ground. Perhaps retrace that for us.
OK, so what do we know about Yoel Romero? He's a dangerous, scary individual that's got explosive power at any point in the fight. So that unpredictability is the challenge for Adesanya. Getting too drawn into a fight early on leaves him susceptible to those flying knees and those wild flurries that he's got. So what I expect Adesanya to do, and what we saw in the Whittaker fight, is if at any point he sees that flurry coming, he's just going to give it space. When he feels like that energy is starting to die down from Yoel Romero, then it's going to be safer to stay slightly closer to him, slightly more inside the pocket, so when Romero does start to move forward, then he can start to look for his counters. But fighting without ego in those first couple of rounds and not trying to eat the octagon up in front of Romero is the most logical thing to do. What he wants to do is play the long game and kind of pick at Yoel Romero so as not to put himself in danger of that devastating knockout power.
Now, with looking back at Romero's career for this show, I can't be the only one that thinks that there have been some good changes in his game, particularly, I think, with his boxing and his defensive elements. But I wanted to get your opinion on this and some more kind of defined points of how you think he's gotten better. OK, well, just like in the first half of the show, we identified that there was a shift in Adesanya's approach from the Gastelum fight to the Whittaker fight. In the Gastelum fight, he was staying in the pocket earlier on in the fight. He paid for it because he got dropped. Proved he had a chin. Exactly.
Proved he had a chin, absolutely. He did the same thing in the Whittaker fight, but still got hit when he didn't want to get hit.
Proved he had knockout power.
Proved he had knockout power, exactly. I mean, you know, we're always learning new things about him, but what he wants to show and what he needs to show against Romero is not that he's got a chin, because, I mean, you're going to need a chin against Romero if he clips you anyway. And not that he's got that kind of mentality where he needs to get the finish early. We need to see patience. We need to see precision from him. What we've seen from Romero, though, is a difference in the way that he approaches the pace of the fight. And I feel like this was learned from the Whittaker fight as well, the first one. Because in the first Whittaker fight, he came out, he was the oblique kicks, he was wrestling him, Whittaker was defending takedowns. And at the end of those first round or two, Romero looked less of himself, and I think he felt more vulnerable when he was tired. I think in Romero's head, if he's fresh, no one's going to be able to hurt him. I mean, like, the defensive stuff that he does in the fight when he's under pressure, against someone that's got boulders for shoulders as well, someone that can really do a lot of damage if you allow them. I mean, stuff's just bouncing off him. He's quite happy to allow Paulo Costa to work. Romero knows that he's got he's got a hardened frame. I mean, people say he's made out of steel. But he's also got good reactions. He's also great at letting stuff roll off his shoulders. The difference between the two of these fighters is that Paulo, my old Taekwondo teacher, Mick Rowley, used to say this: you might as well have sent me a postcard before you threw that punch. He winds up so big because that's his thing. He's a power puncher. Now, so's Yoel Romero, so he was able to see these things coming. He's able to read those patterns. And if this had been over 5 rounds, I mean, you look at Paulo Costa at the end of the third, I think Romero would have probably put a bigger dent in him over 5 rounds, or maybe even stopped him. I feel like Romero is much better over 5 rounds. I mean, what, 6 knockouts in the third round? Those first 2 rounds, especially since the Whittaker fight, the first Whittaker fight, he kind of allows those rounds to breathe a little bit. He doesn't really seem to put his foot on the gas at all in those rounds. So I'm expecting him to be quite cautious in the first rounds, allow Adesanya to work, and just try and pot shot him with that big punch. I think once the rounds get into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, that's when he starts thinking, OK, bursts or start to walk him down. I mean, that's the change in his style. The change in his style is that he's not bouncing, he's not kind of moving as much as he used to, in and out.
You've got that frame. You can't do it for 5.
No, that's it. Nobody could carry that over 25 minutes. So I think the new style that we've seen, where he's here and he's walking himself into range, it shows a confidence that he can take big punches off people, a confidence that he has the reactions to be able to read what's coming and keep himself out of danger. And also, if the sprint attacks aren't working, he needs another way of getting inside.
Yeah.
I expect the sprint attacks to fail against Adesanya. So his next line of attack is to try and stand on his front foot and force him back up against the fence, where he just has to deal with that big power.
Yeah, and if anyone can walk through a meteor shower, it's Yoel Romero, right? And talking of someone who might be throwing quite a few barbs his way, it is Israel Adesanya. He is an elite-level striker, and I'm excited about what you're going to show us, Dan, because feints and trickery in striking, when it's done brilliantly, it's awesome to watch, but it's easily missed as well. So I'm hoping that you're going to be able to show us some of these finite details. And one thing I noted from Adesanya in the lead-up to this, he said he wants to make Yoel Romero cry. And this is the way that he's going to do it, right, with his striking?
Yes, it is. And it's a steady beatdown over the 25 minutes is the way that Adesanya is going to approach this. Like, if he wants to make Yoel Romero cry, he's got to be conscious while he's crying. People don't cry when they're unconscious. So one big punch to knock him out, he's not going to wake up on the floor in tears. He wants to slowly take his soul away throughout the whole fight. And the beauty of the way that Adesanya approaches things is that he's not... If we're fighting and I'm going to throw my left hand, I'm going to wing this wide, you're going to block that. You're going to see it coming.
Yeah.
If I go like this and you expect to see this coming and I throw a front kick to your face, you're not blocking the strike that's coming. You're blocking the strike that you're anticipating.
Right.
This is where Adesanya is so good, because he throws things that you anticipate and then switches it up in the moment. Partly because he's not really committing 100% to power. He's not trying to damage you with every shot. He's trying to unlock your guard and find your weaknesses. In his UFC debut against Rob Wilkinson, I'm sorry, Rob, this was just a shutout. I mean, Adesanya, aside from getting taken down a couple of times and getting straight back to his feet, this was a clinic. And watch the way he moves. Watch how slick he is, how smooth he is. This where he's picking him off. You can see the reactions that Wilkinson's getting because he thinks a shot's coming and then it doesn't. And then something else comes and he blocks one shot and gets hit by another. That constant discouraging, my defense is not working, my guard's leaky. I mean, his guard was like a sieve in this fight because he couldn't stop Adesanya getting inside it. When a fighter's slumped up against the fence covering their head, they might not be physically beaten, but their soul has been beaten. Adesanya stole his soul that night, and Rob Wilkinson collapsed against the fence. That's what he's talking about. It's a comprehensive beatdown as opposed to a switching off with one punch.
So, Dan, let's switch it over to Romero then. And you were saying earlier about his ability to get the finish. 6 out of his 7 knockouts have come out in the 3rd round. So he does find ways to win and shut the fight down, sometimes around those middle rounds as well. Yeah,
and I think, like I was saying, because this is a 5-round fight, those first couple of rounds, I don't think he's going to be forcing the point against Adesanya. I think he was going to feel too much at risk, especially because he knows Adesanya can fight hard over 5 rounds. I think those first couple of rounds is where Romero kind of hangs back, pot shots, flying knees, those kind of things, to try and catch him when he's overcommitting to stuff. I think when it gets into the 3rd, 4th and 5th round, that's when we see Romero starting to take the initiative. We might see some bursts early, but I think ultimately the way he's going to try and get his hands on Adesanya is to walk himself into range. And what we've seen in some of his fights is this. I mean, it's almost like he's not bothered about anything that's coming back at him. I mean, he was walking Brunson down like nothing was going to come back at him to hurt him. I mean, to do that against someone like Machida, who is an excellent striker, a great counter striker, really good at laying traps, and drawing people on to stuff that they don't want to get hit with. Even when he was hitting Romero, it wasn't really affecting him. And this was just brutality in its best form. I mean, a lovely little double jab with a right overhand left.
Oh.
No, don't look away.
If you're squeamish, look away.
No, let's watch the replay and let's appreciate it. It's a beautiful shot. The double jab purely to set the left hand up. There was no real need for the double jab in that fight to actually hit Rockhold. He was jabbing over his head to come over with the left hand. I mean, he was exposing the same weakness that Bisping showed on Rockhold, basically, is that because Rockhold was sinking away for the check hook, just came over the top of that. But what was nice about that in comparison is that wasn't Romero sprinting from one side of the octagon to the other to get him up against the fence. That was him walking his way into range and Rockhold backing up because he knows the danger's coming.
Switching it back over to Adesanya then, and I've heard people talk about how they like to do their work, and something that really resonated with me was when I heard someone who was particularly good at striking, or just fighting in general, is making things look like it's happening in slow motion. And Adesanya is so elite, he does that. I feel like that's how he operates, because it's just millimetres here and there, and it's how did you see those opportunities? I think he's one of those athletes.
I agree, and that's his kickboxing record that's backing him up in that circumstance. I am firmly of the opinion that comfortability under pressure in striking exchanges only comes from years and years and years of fighting and sparring.
Pads don't do it.
Pads don't do it because it's exactly that. It's live combat with someone that's thinking for themselves and throwing various different techniques at you. I mean, 80 kickboxing matches? There's probably a few rematches in there, but it's likely there's probably 70 different opponents.
Yeah.
70 different looks, maybe more. Same thing with his MMA career. There's been several different looks. So he's got this understanding that there are so many different options out there and he's got a good read on them. And he'll start to identify which one of those reads he's going to need in this fight, and then he'll start applying it. But the relaxed nature in which he approaches fights allows him to use feints and really sell them well. I mean, Brad Tavares Brad Tavares is a great fighter. He just wasn't able to read the movement of Adesanya. And there's this little sequence here which I'll show you. Watch this. So he hits a leg kick and then a body kick. So he's programmed the body kick in Tavares' head now. The next one, he does the slide with the knee. Watch that. Look at that.
Lovely.
I mean, it's just so subtle. It's so subtle. Watch the back foot. And bear in mind, think you're Brad Tavares. You've just taken a nasty shot to the liver and your body's starting to shut down. You don't want to take this shot anymore. Right, let's just have a quick look at this. So watch how he slides in here. Very relaxed. And you can't look at that. You can't sell these feints unless you're relaxed because there's going to be tension. Your opponent will see that you're tensing up. But he throws that little feint, slides himself into range, and then bang, straight down the pipe. And then with the head kick, and again, it's like 50% power, 50% power. He'd rather land with half power than not land at all. And he also knows that his striking style has a snowball effect. It's not like one punch, it's a gathering of momentum, another body shot, like mixing things up. And I stole it from Teddy Atlas. It's one of my favorite phrases at the moment. He puts water in the basement. He puts money in the bank. Gastelum gave everything he could in that fight. The thing that was the tipping point in that last round is that he'd just taken too much. He couldn't take anymore. He'd been hit to the body, he'd been weakened. Even in that last round, Adesanya hit to the body before he went to the head for the knockdown. That constant varying of targets it's not one finishing technique. That's the beauty of it. It's a dismantling of the whole enemy defense. We talked about it with John Jones. It's attacking the supply lines. It's taking out the left flank. It's taking out the right flank. It's using that psychological propaganda to get inside their opponent's head and make them do things they don't want to do. All of these things are in Adesanya's skill set, and I don't know whether Romero's faced anybody that can actually do that to him before. Rob Whittaker's a great striker, but it's still much more of a fundamentally sound, nice, technical, covers distance well. There's not the same kind of trickery that there is from Adesanya. And that's the point of difference here, is making Romero do things that he doesn't want to do and getting hit with things he's not expecting.
Dan, thank you very much for your thoughts and analysis. Keep the conversation going using the hashtag #InsideTheOctagon. @UFC Europe is the handle. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy this blockbuster of a title fight. It's going to be a big one. We'll see you next time.